Since COVID-19, of course, more people are eating at home, which means more meal planning, prepping, and inevitably, irritatingly, a lot more cleanup in the kitchen.
So much more, but in an effort to reduce the amount of dishes that pile up in the sink, recipes that use just one sheet pan have become very popular.
Indeed, they have. Here to share some tasty yet very easy to make fall recipes, we welcome back Becky Church of the Minnesota Beef Council via Skype. Becky, listen. I think that a sheet pan dinner is great, and it feels really good because folks feel like it's manageable. You're cooking it all at one time. That's fabulous. It gets even better when you have a sheet pan dinner for garlic, Parmesan steak, and potatoes. Tell me a story.
We're talking low stress, no hassle here, and this is perfect. These meals, you can class it up for a date night in. Otherwise, they're easy enough to make on the go with your busy weeknights now that we're fully in school. So, like you said, we have a roasted Parmesan garlic sheet pan dinner. It looks delicious there. Wow. We're starting with some miniature potatoes, which I actually sliced in half and then coated with sea salt and olive oil. Now, one thing to note with potatoes is that they require longer cooking time than most vegetables. So we actually give them a head start on the sheet pan for about 20 minutes at 375 and then take the pan out. And today we're going to be featuring a flank steak in this recipe, which you can kind of see here.
Indeed.
It's a lean cut, which I often talk about marinating since you can, tenderize it that way and add a lot of flavor, but you don't necessarily have to do that. So today I'm going to show you how to make a rub for it.
Now, let me ask this question about the rub because I really like a rub. I like a dry rub, like with if I'm eating anything. I don't know why I prefer it over a marinade.
Like a barbecue.
Yeah, but on the flip side, though, you're talking about that the marinade can help to tenderize the meat. Do you lose some of that, and do you have to adjust cook time at all whenever you're using a dry rub versus a marinade?
That's a great question. The cook time actually stays pretty similar. Today we're actually going to be broiling it, which is a total different cook method than usually what we do, which is the grill. So make the rub, actually today we're using some cheese too. We have Parm in there, and we have some olive oil. Never enough Parm, right?
Well, that Parm too is going to really add a little crust by the end of all this.
Right, especially broiling too. If you're not aware, that's high heat. So it's super fast, actually. We just mix up this rub and put it right on to the flank steak.
Oh, this looks great.
It'll crust up nicely, especially with this cheese right in it.
Now, a flank steak, it's a thinner cut of meat. So my girls are real particular about, meat and if it's got fat on it and if it's going to be chewy. What's the consistency of a flank steak when it's cooked?
So that's all depends on how long you cook it and obviously proper cook times. My biggest plea to you would obviously to be using a meat thermometer, temp it to 145, and that's going to give you a medium rare versus often when you think it's too chewy, it's often just because it's overcooked. So you can use a lot of lean cuts and still have a really great eating experience if it's prepared correctly.
And then when you get that flank steak, Becky has told me this time and time again, you need to cut against the grain. If you cut with the grain, it'll add extra chew. If you cut against the grain, it'll be much easier to chew and enjoy.
That's a huge tip. So actually, once we put the rub on both sides of the steak, we'll pop it into the oven on broil, which again, broil takes something from 0 to 100 really fast. So I'd recommend watching the clock for about 8 to 10 minutes, flipping halfway, and then we get a perfectly medium rare steak. Let sit, like Sue said, sliced against the grain, and it's a perfect.
Boy,
that looks unreal.
Well, that looks really great. All right, we're off and running here already. Now, so steak feels highfalutin, right? It feels like, wow, we're having steak for dinner tonight. Meatloaf can feel a whole lot more pedestrian, and we were discussing off air, we have varied memories of meatloaf. Mine, not so great. Kelly happened to love it growing up.
So delicious. But I like the idea of making little mini ones.
Yeah, meatloaf, kind of can have a negative connotation depending on what you grew up with, Steve, like we talked about. A lot of times people get a little anxious about meatloaf or think it's a drag just because the loaf of meat takes a long time to cook in the oven. A lot of times we don't have that time or patience really to wait for it. So today we're making that easier by making them into 1 pound of ground beef into 4 mini meatloaves, which is going to help reduce your cooking time drastically. So I'm actually using 93% lean ground beef. Again, I'm going with leaner simply because we're going to add barbecue sauce infused right into it. So it's going to add some moisture and flavor.
Yum.
Yeah, let that go.
The thing about meatloaf is if it's a dry meatloaf, which is probably what you've
That's what I
experienced.
had. And then we would dip it in ketchup.
Oh, well, yeah.
That was my situation with meatloaf growing up. So you said that was barbecue sauce going on there?
Yeah.
Glory,
if you want to class
hallelujah.
it up, now please take it to the level of barbecue sauce too.
I
gonna be
love
so
that.
good.
And I'm just adding some spices in here. We have garlic, salt, pepper, some thyme. Mix that up. And then you're going to actually form the 1 pound of ground beef into 4 mini football-sized meatloaves. And football, because 'tis the season, it's easy to remember.
Sure.
So doing that, you'll put them on the pan, glaze it with your leftover barbecue sauce, and pop them in the oven. One hack I want to say, too, if we're working with a side of vegetables, you can use whatever you have on hand or whatever is in season to save money. So I actually chose green beans just because I'm a green bean gal myself. And rather than putting them right in the sheet pan, drizzling, and then having to take your hands and get them all full of the salt and oil, you can actually put them right into the bag with olive oil and then salt, shake them up, and it's just like a little bit of shake and bake action right through the pan. Put your meatloaf down the center, pop it in the oven at 400 degrees.
Super easy.
How about that? All right, Becky, before you go, we're running out of time here, but could you just quickly show us, you've got this hoagie recipe that one could do with a sheet pan. I love this. What do we have?
Yeah, so I'm just using Italian beef sausage roasted with red onions, bell peppers, all in one pan. So we don't even have to cook it separately with the potatoes first or anything like that, because they'll all cook at the same rate, especially if you use a pre-cooked beef sausage. Then I have it on a hoagie bun. You can even melt provolone cheese to make it a Philly cheesesteak,
Yes.
or use
Yum.
some homemade Greek yogurt sauce for a tzatziki feel.
Becky, 3 great ideas,
Really
all
great
involving
ideas.
the sheet pan. We already asked our viewers to watch this segment with their sheet pans in hand, and we trust that they will send us pictures proving that they did just that. Becky, good to have you back on the show.
Thanks,
As
Becky.
always, we posted these recipes over at TwinCitiesLive.com. You'll also find a link to Minnesota Beef Council's website. It's a great website. It's got additional meal ideas, nutrition information, even workouts.
Oh, how about that? Hey, coming up,